If you're an EMT, you may have seen one of these ads online looking for EMT basics to work at a local plasma center and wonder just what exactly one of these positions looks like. Obviously, this is a very different role from what EMT usually does, where you'd be working on board of an ambulance or in an emergency medical setting, and you may not know what to expect. I personally worked at one of these jobs full-time for a period of 1 year and 1 month, and today I'd like to give my honest review and a realistic job outlook as to what these positions are like. Side note, if any of you out there are just curious about the details of plasma donation centers and how they operate, I made an extremely detailed guide regarding the entire process. I'll put the link in the description. The basic requirements to apply for a job as an EMT at a plasma center is obviously certification as an EMT in your state. That's at the EMT basic level. Advanced emergency medical technician or paramedic certification won't be required. You're also going to need a current valid CPR, AED, or BLS card, and your high school diploma or GED. Experience is generally not required for these positions, at least where I worked. They will take fresh graduate EMTs, or certified EMTs who ended up working somewhere other than EMS. Honestly, even customer service experience is going to look great and help you get this job. I'll personally recommend you send in a good, clean, easy-to-read resume that includes your name, contact info, work experience, certifications, and education to help you land a job interview. Obviously, pay is going to vary from location to location, but as an example, in my area, the average hourly pay for an EMT ranges from $11 to $15 an hour. At my plasma center job, I earned $18 an hour. I also received comprehensive benefits, including medical, dental, and vision insurance, short and long-term disability insurance, 401k matching, and paid time off. Generally, the pay and benefits at a plasma center will be very competitive for the EMT level. Once you start the job, you'll be greeted by the plasma center itself. These buildings are usually very clinical, and the interior may remind you of a large doctor's or dentist's office. You may be shocked to find out your official job title will likely be physician substitute or phys sub. Don't be worried about this. It's just a term that the plasma industry uses. It refers to a person designated by the center's medical doctor to act on their behalf. At my center, the required uniform was always scrubs, similar to a medical assistant or nurse uniform. You'll also be issued a full-sleeve lab coat and a face shield, which will be required during parts of your job. The job will always start with a mandatory 8 weeks or more of in-house training. You'll start with basic orientations to the facility, company, and production process, and progress to working closely with your new designated trainer, an experienced staff member who will walk you through every step of learning your new position. As an EMT at a plasma center, you play an important role in the production of blood plasma, which is used to make life-saving medicines for people around the world. You'll be working in front of house. You'll be spending most of your time in the main lobby, at the reception and registration desks, and in a physical exam room, similar to a doctor's office. The following are going to be your primary job duties. The first is performing routine physical exams. Federal law places strict regulatory requirements on who can and cannot donate plasma. The very last part of this process is a routine physical exam for every new donor. A huge part of your job is going to be actually performing these exams. During these exams, you'll take a donor into a confidential exam room and perform a routine head-to-toe examination. This will include looking at their eyes, their head and neck, their lymph nodes, their upper and lower extremities, and listening to their heart and lungs with a stethoscope. During the exam, you'll be looking for serious medical concerns that can make it dangerous for a person to donate their plasma. Usually, the exam itself takes around 8 to 10 minutes. Witness and complete donor paperwork. After completing every physical exam, you'll sit down with each donor in the exam room and complete all of their consent paperwork, usually electronically prior to donating. A large part of your job will be explaining and reviewing the information that they need to understand prior to signing. You'll discuss and ask questions regarding bloodborne pathogens such as HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis, and review the donation procedure including risks and side effects. You'll also be in charge of giving each approved donor a payment card at the end of the process, so they can get paid for their donation. Review donor questionnaires. Each time a person comes in to donate plasma, they're required to complete a pre-donation questionnaire to screen for potential risks and problems before they enter the process. If a donor gives a concerning answer, the computer system will flag it, and you'll need to sit down with them to review it. Depending on your review with the donor, you'll decide whether or not a donor needs to be deferred from donating plasma, and for how long, following a reference index called the Donor Deferral Matrix. You'll document each of these decisions in the computer system. Respond to donor reactions and emergencies. You won't normally need to spend much time while a person is actually donating their plasma, as this is usually handled by phlebotomists and donor floor technicians. But when a person has a serious reaction, you could be called at any moment to respond. Personally, I saw several donors each week have a reaction, and on a handful of occasions, these reactions were life-threatening. Your job is going to be to assess and care for the donor. You'll be in charge of deciding how best to end their donation procedure, monitoring their vital signs such as blood pressure and pulse, and deciding whether or not to give oral fluids, and most importantly, determining whether or not to call 911. You'll be required to document every reaction in detail, similar to a run report on an ambulance. You'll need to collect donor and donation info, keep track of the time things occur, record symptoms, and what actions you took. At my center, we were not allowed to administer any medications. We could not give oxygen, Narcan, albuterol, or epinephrine. We were even instructed that we weren't allowed to use CPR masks, and the center refused to carry AEDs. We were instructed that we could only perform compression-only CPR. If we violated these policies, we risked being fired. What that means is that your most critical role is in whether or not you dial 911, as you are the key link in recognizing when a life is in danger and getting a person to a higher level of care as soon as possible. At my center, another EMT and I were the only two people in the building who recognized a person was having a life-threatening diabetic emergency, and were responsible for activating EMS and potentially saving her life. Once you've learned your primary job duties, you will almost always be required to cross-train into more areas of the facility. At my center, we were also required to learn reception and new donor registration, where you create new accounts for each donor in the computer system and walk them through the first few steps in becoming a plasma donor. Once you've learned reception and registration, you will eventually be required to cross-train into other jobs as well. So, honest review, is it worth it? Did I like this job? Would I work this job again? Would I recommend you take this job? Let's go into some pros and some cons. First off, the pros, genuinely competitive pay. For EMT level, this job pays extremely well. Good benefits, like I said, very comprehensive benefits package that may be hard to find at some EMS agencies. A very normal schedule. At a place like this, you're not going to have any crazy 24 or 48 hour shifts. You're never going to have to work overnight. Generally going to be lower stress. You're rarely going to be dealing with death or suffering like you might see on 911 calls. You have a lot of genuinely interesting social interactions and medical findings when you're doing your exams. You have a lot of time in private with people to kind of talk and ask them different questions. You're going to get good experience getting comfortable performing exams and procedures. If you've never really had to touch a patient before, you'll get a lot of hands-on contact here. And you are genuinely assisting in a process that makes life-saving medications for people. Going into cons, first of all, very, very strict supervision. You're going to be very, very closely monitored by management and by quality assurance. If you're used to working independently, this won't be like that at all. The job will get really repetitive. You'll be doing the same tasks again and again. I want to emphasize that there is no room to do things your own way. Even in the exam room, you're going to be doing the same exam time and time again. You are going to be stuck working indoors, often without any windows. They actually covered our windows up with paint where I worked so that we couldn't see the sun, and said they put an advertisement up over the windows. So you're going to have very limited time to go outside while you're at work. You are going to have to deal with very angry, desperate, and intoxicated donors all the time. There's going to be a lot of really difficult customer service working at a plasma center. And also, I'd just like to say there is quite a bit of moral ambiguity. A lot of people are really desperate and donate their plasma just to survive. So you're going to see a lot of poverty and a lot of people in really bad life situations. And, it can just be strange watching these people sell their blood. So in the end, would I recommend this job? Honestly, at a certain point, if you need a job, yes, 100% take it. Having stable, good pay and benefits are really important, and this job will absolutely give you that. But what's really going to make it or break it in the end is the people you work with. You're going to be very closely supervised and monitored, and working with toxic people will make this job absolutely miserable. Personally, I couldn't stand my quality assurance supervisor. Since part of his job was to perform regular observations on me, I had to constantly deal with him, and his toxic attitude and verbal anger made my job absolutely miserable. But I don't think it has to be that way, and I think whether or not you have a good experience with this job will really depend on who you end up working with. Personally, I had a lot of trouble stomaching the absolute poverty people are in, especially when donating plasma, and felt really ethically and morally conflicted with what I was doing. I ended up leaving my position after a year, and now I'm going to work in the interfacility transport business with an even better compensation package than before. To give the plasma industry all due credit, I think my experience with them was key in landing my new job. And that's my honest review of the job. Do you have any questions or comments? Don't hesitate to let me know down below.